"You're wasting your time," Alexander Reed said, his voice cold and dismissive, echoing through the sleek conference room. Maya Williams stood in the corner, hands trembling slightly, but her face remained calm, unreadable. The billionaire had just ordered her to stay silent, his words laced with authority, expecting her to do nothing but serve. Yet, she knew, deep down, that this moment would change everything. She had already heard too much. She knew too much, and she was about to make him regret his mistake. She glanced at the others in the room, their eyes avoiding hers, too afraid to meet her gaze. Maya wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just the help. She was about to change the course of Reed's empire. As she stood there, a small voice in her head reminded her of her grandmother's words. "People don't see you, Maya, but that's your power." The room fell silent again as Alexander Reed shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His wealthy, polished demeanor was starting to crack. Maya could feel it. The air between them was thick with the tension of unspoken truth. She had heard the entire conversation. How his company was on the verge of disaster. How a deal that could destroy everything was right in front of him. The board members didn't seem to notice the glaring mistake in the contract they were about to sign. But Maya did. She understood the language of business, the intricacies of legal terms. She wasn't just any waitress. She had a degree in finance, a past she kept hidden from everyone in this room. When Reed had barked at her to stay silent, he had no idea he was silencing the one person who could save him. She waited, her breath steady, as the seconds dragged on. Every fiber of her being wanted to speak, but she remained still, silent. Her moment would come, and when it did, it would change everything. "Maya," Reed called out, his voice tinged with impatience. "Get back to your job." She turned to face him, the weight of the moment sinking in. Her eyes locked with his for the briefest second before she spoke, her voice low but steady. "I can't, sir. Not this time." The room fell even quieter. The murmurs of the board members faded into the background as she stepped forward, her every movement calculated and deliberate. She reached for the contract on the table, the one everyone else had been too eager to sign. "There's a clause here that you've missed," she said, her voice ringing with quiet authority. "It's going to ruin your company. If you sign this, you're giving away all control of your assets." "I've already read it. I'm sure no one else has, but I have." Reed's face turned pale as he looked at her, the arrogance fading from his features. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The room was still. Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. She had just saved them all. Maya's words lingered in the air, their weight heavier than anyone could have expected. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, the tension hanging like a thick fog. Alexander Reed's face, once full of arrogance, was now pale, his hands slightly shaking as he took in her words. The rest of the board members remained silent, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever dared to speak up like this in a meeting, especially not someone like Maya. She wasn't even supposed to be here. She wasn't meant to have this power. But here she was, standing before the man who held the reins of a multi-million-dollar empire, telling him that his company was moments away from disaster. For a second, she thought Reed might fire her on the spot, tell security to escort her out. But instead, his eyes searched hers, his mind racing. Maya had already done what no one else in the room could. She had spotted the fatal flaw in the deal, the one thing that could bring everything crashing down. "How do you know this?" Reed's voice was hoarse, a far cry from the commanding tone he'd used just moments before. "You're just a waitress." Maya stood tall, her eyes unwavering. "I'm more than just a waitress," she said quietly. "I have a degree in finance, and I've worked in corporate legal teams before. I know what I'm talking about." Reed blinked, his lips pressing into a thin line as he absorbed the information. It was clear now that Maya wasn't just some uneducated servant. She had knowledge that could change the game. "What do you suggest we do?" he asked, the words almost slipping out in a desperate plea for help. Maya stepped closer, the others still frozen in place. She pointed to the clause in the contract, highlighting the exact line where the company was about to lose control. "You need to cancel the merger. If you proceed, you'll be liable for everything, and your competitors will take advantage of it." Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness there, something no one in the room had seen from her before. "You have to get your legal team to renegotiate. Get them to clean up the mess." Reed stared at the contract in front of him, his mind spinning. He had never expected this. A simple waitress, a woman he had dismissed as insignificant, had just saved his company from total collapse. He had no choice but to listen now. I don't know what to say, Reed muttered, his mind racing. You've just saved everything. I didn't even know you were qualified. Maya's expression softened, but she didn't smile. I didn't want anyone to know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just needed a job. But sometimes, the world works in strange ways. You can't always hide who you really are. Reed nodded slowly, still in disbelief. You're not just a waitress, he said again, almost as if trying to convince himself. Maya gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. No, I'm not. There was a brief moment of silence, before Reed cleared his throat. We'll fix this. Immediately. I'll make sure you're compensated for this, for everything. Maya shook her head. No need, she said firmly. I did what was right. That's all. She turned to leave the room, her heart racing, but her steps steady. As she reached the door, Reed called after her, his voice more sincere than it had ever been. Maya, wait. I owe you. She paused, glancing over her shoulder, but didn't turn around. Just do the right thing, she said, before walking out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her, and the room was silent once more, the tension now replaced with an uneasy understanding. Reed sat back in his chair, still trying to process what had just happened. Maya had done more than save his company. She had opened his eyes to a reality he had never seen before. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly humbled. Maya hadn't expected to feel the weight of Reed's words so heavily. She had done what she believed was right, and yet, as she stepped out of the boardroom, the weight of the moment began to settle in. The building was still, almost eerily so, as if holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. She hadn't realized until now how much she'd longed for validation, how much she needed to be seen, not just as a waitress, but as someone who had something valuable to offer. She stood for a moment in the hallway, letting the sound of her footsteps echo around her. It was strange, this feeling of power. She had known it all along, deep inside, but it had never been given a voice until now. But as she glanced back at the closed door behind her, her mind couldn't help but wander to the faces in the room, the board members who had watched her as if she were invisible just moments ago. How would they treat her now? As she made her way toward the elevator, the familiar hum of the building felt different. The usual monotony of her life had shifted, and for the first time, she wondered what came next. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and as she stepped inside, she took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what Reed would do next. She wasn't sure what her role in his world would be now. All she knew was that she had done something that no one else could have. She had saved him, his company, and perhaps even his own ego. As the elevator descended, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflective surface. The woman staring back at her was still the same Maya Williams, but somehow, she felt different. Her reflection seemed clearer, more confident, as if the act of standing up had allowed her to shed the weight she'd carried for so long. She had always kept her knowledge hidden, the skills she had honed in secret, and now she had the chance to show the world her worth. As the elevator reached the ground floor, the doors opened, and Maya stepped out into the lobby, where the usual staff rushed around, lost in their duties. She felt like an outsider here, though she had worked in the building for years. But now, she felt as though she was finally seeing it all for what it truly was, a system that had worked to keep people like her in the background, out of sight, out of mind. She took one last look around before stepping outside into the crisp air. The world felt different out here, too. She had done what no one thought she could do. But as the city stretched out in front of her, she knew that her journey was far from over. She hadn't just changed the course of Reed's company. She had changed the course of her own life. Maya pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, the evening air biting against her skin, but she didn't mind. The chill felt like freedom. The future, whatever it held, was now in her hands. Maya spent the following days in a haze, her mind still buzzing with the events that had unfolded in the boardroom. She had expected Reed to be grateful, to offer her a chance to move up in the world, perhaps even a new role in his company. But none of that came. She had received no calls, no messages, nothing. She had done the right thing, saved a company from certain collapse, and yet it felt like her actions were nothing more than a fleeting moment. As she walked through the streets of the city, her feet carried her without much thought. She had to keep moving. She had to find her next step. The cold air nipped at her cheeks, but it felt refreshing, almost like a reminder that she was still alive, still moving forward. It had been weeks since the boardroom incident, and the weight of her silence was beginning to gnaw at her. She had made a powerful impact, but it felt as though no one truly saw her for what she had done. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a servant. She was a woman who had saved everything, yet still remained invisible. Every day, she passed by the grand buildings of the city, the tall glass structures where the elite made their decisions, and she felt an unshakable sense of disconnection. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to shake the feeling that she didn't belong. It wasn't just the buildings, it was everything. The power, the wealth, the status. It all felt so far out of reach. She had played her part in the game, and now she was standing outside of it, looking in. As she walked, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, half expecting it to be another bill collector or some spam email, but when she saw the name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. It was Reed. For a moment, she stood still in the middle of the sidewalk, her hand frozen on the screen. Should she answer? Should she ignore it? She had done everything right. She had saved his company, and now she wasn't sure what more he could want from her. After a moment of hesitation, she pressed the answer button. Maya. Reed's voice came through, sounding tired, but with an edge of something she hadn't heard before, genuine respect. I owe you an apology. Maya paused, unsure of how to respond. Apology for what? She asked, her voice steady but with a hint of confusion. For not recognizing what you did when you did it. For not seeing you for who you truly are. Maya's heart raced. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to admit that he had been wrong, that he had been blind to her worth. I didn't just save your company, she said, her voice a little softer now. I saved you. I know, he replied, his tone quiet. And I want to make it right. I want to offer you something. A real role in this company. A chance to work with us, not as a servant, but as someone who can make real change. The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't just an offer of a job. It was a chance to prove herself, to finally show the world what she was capable of. I don't know if I'm ready, Maya admitted, the weight of the decision suddenly pressing down on her. I've spent my whole life being invisible. I don't know how to step into that world. You already have, Reed said. You took control when everyone else was too afraid. You did what needed to be done. That's why I'm calling you now. You belong here, Maya. Don't doubt that. Maya felt a wave of emotion wash over her, but she pushed it aside. This was her moment. She couldn't let it slip by. I'll think about it, she said, her voice firm. But I don't need your charity. I want to earn it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Reed spoke again. I understand. You'll earn it, Maya. You already have. Maya hung up the phone, standing still in the bustling street, the noise of the city swirling around her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had the power to choose her own path. The world was hers to take, and nothing, no one, would stop her. Maya stood at the threshold of the conference room, her heart pounding as she prepared to walk into the new reality that awaited her. The past few weeks had felt like a whirlwind, with each day bringing a fresh wave of uncertainty and possibility. She had never imagined herself in this position, standing on the verge of something so much larger than what she had ever dreamed. She had spent so many years trying to be invisible, keeping her knowledge, her talents, hidden away. But now, she had been given the chance to step into the world she had once only observed from the outside. As she walked into the boardroom, the familiar faces of Reed and the other executives turned toward her. They all seemed to have the same surprised expression, as if they were trying to process the fact that this woman, the same one they had once dismissed, was now part of their team. Reed stood at the head of the table, his expression a mix of admiration and curiosity. Maya, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority and respect. This is your chance. You've proven that you can think like us, act like us. Now, show us that you belong here. Maya nodded, her nerves running high, but there was something inside her that had shifted. She wasn't just here to prove herself anymore. She was here to change the game. She had already saved this company once. Now, it was time to see just how much further she could take it. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady as she took her seat at the table. The room was quiet for a moment, as if everyone was waiting for her to say something more, but Maya didn't feel the need to explain herself. She had. already shown them who she was. Now, it was time to do the work. The meeting began, and as the executives discussed their latest strategies, Maya listened carefully, her mind working quickly. She had been given access to the kind of information she had never dreamed of. She could see the cracks in their plans, the things they had overlooked. And with every passing minute, her confidence grew. She knew exactly what needed to be done. When the discussion shifted to a new project, Maya raised her hand. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. "I think there's a better way to approach this," she said, her voice clear and firm. Reed raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Go ahead," he said, leaning forward slightly. Maya took a deep breath and began to outline her strategy. She spoke with authority, her ideas flowing smoothly, backed by the knowledge she had honed over the years. The room was quiet as she spoke, each word landing with precision. By the time she finished, she could see the shift in the room. The executives were no longer looking at her with skepticism. They were listening. They were paying attention. Reed leaned back in his chair, his eyes locked on hers. "You've got a point," he said, his tone no longer dismissive but thoughtful. "Let's give it a shot." As the meeting wrapped up, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment, but it wasn't just about the approval she had received. It was about the realization that she had earned her place here, not through luck, not through charity, but through her own abilities. She had earned this moment. As she left the boardroom, a wave of calm washed over her. The city outside was as bustling as ever, but it no longer felt distant or out of reach. For the first time in her life, Maya felt like she belonged. And this was just the beginning. Maya's confidence continued to grow as the days passed. She had earned her place in the company, but more than that, she had begun to reshape her own perception of herself. No longer just the invisible woman in the background, Maya had carved out a space for herself at the table. Every meeting felt like another opportunity to prove that she wasn't just there by chance. She was there because she had something to offer. The challenges of her new role were numerous, but with each one, Maya felt more capable, more powerful. The executives who once looked at her with doubt now sought her input, listening intently to her ideas and acknowledging her expertise. It was a far cry from the dismissive way she had been treated when she first entered Reed's world. One afternoon, as Maya sat in her office reviewing a new project proposal, her phone buzzed with a message from Reed. She hadn't spoken to him since the board meeting, but his words on the phone still lingered in her mind. He had apologized, acknowledged her value, and promised that she would have a real opportunity to make a difference. The message was simple, but it made her heart race. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at the office in an hour?" Maya set the phone down, her mind already turning over what it could be about. She had been working on a new business strategy for the company's international expansion, and she knew Reed had been keeping an eye on her progress. Had he noticed something she missed? Was there something she needed to fix? She pushed the thoughts aside and focused on preparing for the meeting. As she walked into the office building an hour later, the familiar faces greeted her, but this time, there was no nervousness. She knew the work she had done. She knew her worth. As she approached the conference room, she found Reed waiting for her, his expression unreadable. "Maya," he said, standing as she entered. "Come in, please." She took a seat across from him, her mind racing as she tried to read his body language. Was this a good sign, or did it mean trouble? Reed sat back, looking at her with a newfound respect. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've done for the company, and for me," he said, his voice more sincere than she had ever heard it. "You've proven yourself in ways that I didn't expect, and you've changed the way we do business here. I've always been about results, but I've never had anyone with your vision." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Reed leaned forward. "Slightly. I want to offer you something more. You've got the skills, the vision, and the drive to take this company to the next level. I'm offering you a role as the head of strategy, overseeing all our major projects, making decisions that shape the future of the company." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. A head of strategy? This was everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of when she first started. The world she had once thought was out of reach was now within her grasp. She took a deep breath, the weight of the offer settling in. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to make her mark. But it wasn't just about the title. It was about the respect she had earned. "I'm honored, Reed," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I accept. Reed smiled, and for the first time, Maya saw him as someone who recognized her as more than just a woman in the background. She was no longer just a waitress or a subordinate. She was a leader, and in that moment, she realized that this was just the beginning of what she could accomplish. Maya's new role as head of strategy came with a level of responsibility she had never imagined for herself. The first few days were a whirlwind of meetings, emails, and planning sessions, but it felt different this time. She wasn't just sitting in the background, taking notes or following orders. She was at the forefront, shaping the direction of the company. Reed had put his trust in her, and she wasn't about to let him down. She spent long hours in the office, sometimes staying late into the night to perfect her strategies, always reviewing, always looking for ways to improve. Slowly but surely, her efforts began to show results. The board members who once barely acknowledged her presence now came to her for advice, asking her opinion on everything from international expansion to market positioning. Maya had earned their respect, and it felt like nothing could stop her. As the weeks passed, Reed and Maya spent more time together, discussing the future of the company and how they could build on its success. His admiration for her skills was evident, but Maya never let it get to her head. She remained focused on the task at hand, always striving for perfection, always looking for the next big idea that could push the company to new heights. One day, after another successful presentation to the board, Reed pulled Maya aside in the hallway. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice serious. "You've exceeded all my expectations. I knew you were capable, but you've really outdone yourself." Maya smiled, but her mind was already on the next project. "I'm just doing my job," she replied. "It's what I'm here for." Reed hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, his tone softer. "Maya, I've been considering something. You've earned more than just my respect. I think you're ready for even more. I want you to take over the international division. It's yours if you want it." Maya's eyes widened in surprise. The international division was a huge responsibility, one that would put her at the helm of the company's global strategy. It was a massive opportunity, but it also meant taking on more risk. She paused for a moment, weighing the decision. "I'm honored, Reed," she said, her voice steady. "But it's a big leap. Are you sure I'm the right person for it?" Reed nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not just sure. I'm certain. You've already shown what you can do, Maya. You've transformed this company. Now, I want you to take that transformation to the global stage." Maya felt a rush of excitement, mixed with a twinge of nerves. This was what she had been working toward, but now it was real. She had to prove herself again, on an even bigger stage. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She had already fought for her place in this world, and she knew she could do it again. "I'll take it," Maya said, her voice filled with determination. "I'll make it work." Over the next few weeks, Maya dove headfirst into her new role, traveling to different countries, meeting with international partners, and negotiating deals that would set the company up for success on a global scale. Each new challenge only made her more confident. She was no longer the woman who had quietly observed the world of high-powered executives. She was a key player, shaping the future of the company. Reed watched her from afar, impressed by the way she handled everything with such grace and intelligence. He had never met anyone like Maya, someone who wasn't just skilled, but driven by something deeper, a desire to make a real impact. As Maya's success continued to grow, so did her influence within the company. She had proven that she belonged at the top, and now there was no turning back. Maya's impact on the company continued to grow, and with it, her confidence. She was no longer the woman who had once silently observed from the back of the room. She was now the woman who led, who made the decisions, who drove the vision. Every step she took seemed to carry her further into the world she had once thought was beyond her reach. But with this success came new challenges. As she moved further into the international division, Maya found herself facing a new set of obstacles. The stakes were higher now. Deals with global partners, cross-border regulations, and cultural barriers all came with their own complexities. Yet, Maya was unfazed. She tackled each challenge with the same calm determination that had carried her from waitress to the head of strategy. She knew the business, but more than that, she understood the people. And it was this understanding that made her an exceptional leader. One morning, as Maya sat in her office, going over a report on an upcoming merger in Europe, Reed walked in. He had a look on his face that Maya recognized. It was the look of someone who had just witnessed something unexpected. Maya, Reed began, sitting down across from her. I've been hearing some interesting things about your work lately. The board is impressed, more than impressed, actually. They're talking about you being the future of this company. Maya listened intently, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. She had always been driven by results, not praise. But hearing this from Reed, someone she had once looked up to, was different. I'm just doing my job, she said, her voice steady. It's what I'm here for. Reed smiled, leaning back in his chair. It's more than that. You've changed the way we think. You've brought a level of vision and innovation that we didn't have before. It's not just your skills, Maya. It's the way you lead. Maya felt a rush of emotion she hadn't expected. She had spent so long trying to prove her worth to others. Now, hearing it from Reed, someone who had once doubted her, it felt like she had finally earned her place. Thank you, she said softly. Reed nodded. But it's not just about your leadership here. I've been thinking about something bigger. I want to put you on the executive board. I want you to have a say in the future direction of the company at the highest level. The words hung in the air for a moment, and Maya's mind raced. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. This was her chance to truly shape the future of the company, not just in a department, but at the core of its strategy. I'm honored, she said, the weight of the decision settling in. But I need to be sure I can do it justice. This is a huge step. Reed smiled again, his expression filled with sincerity. You've already done more than anyone could have imagined. I have no doubt you'll make it work. Maya took a deep breath, her thoughts spinning. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had fought to achieve. The decision was big, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let it slip away. I'll do it, she said, her voice filled with determination. I won't let you down. As she left the meeting, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was the moment that would define her future. The woman who had once cleaned floors, who had once been overlooked, was now at the top. And she was just getting started. Maya sat at her desk, the glow of the late afternoon sun casting a warm light across the room. The city outside buzzed with life, but in her office, everything was still. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound, the silence stretching out in front of her like a soft, welcoming blanket. She looked out the window, the skyline bathed in golden light, the world continuing on as it always had. But inside, something had shifted. She had made it. She had climbed higher than she ever thought possible, and now, as the weight of the moment settled over her, she realized that it wasn't just about the position or the accolades. It was about what she had become. She had faced every challenge, every doubt, and had come out the other side stronger. But now, in this moment of quiet, she knew there was nothing more to prove. She was exactly where she was meant to be. Reed's words from their earlier conversation echoed faintly in her mind, but she didn't need to hear them again. She had already made the decision to accept the offer. She had already chosen to step into the light. But the world wasn't demanding more from her now. It was asking her to simply exist. Maya took a slow breath, her eyes closing for a moment as the warmth of the sun washed over her skin. She could feel the weight of her journey, the long hours, the sleepless nights, the moments of self-doubt, all of it. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It was part of her, and that was enough. The office was quiet, and the world outside, once overwhelming, now felt like a distant hum, just background noise to her own thoughts. She hadn't always been this person, this woman who stood with quiet dignity, her presence commanding attention without a word. She had been the invisible one, the one whose worth was hidden, whose voice went unheard. But now, she was someone who could make decisions that shaped the future. She was someone who could walk into a room and change the course of events without a single word. The silence in the room felt almost sacred. It was the calm after the storm, the stillness before the next wave of challenges would come. But for now, there was only peace. Maya took another breath, the cool air filling her lungs, and in that moment, she knew she had nothing left to prove. She had earned her place, and the quiet was all the affirmation she needed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the room grew darker, the shadows stretching long across the floor. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, each step forward a reflection of everything she had overcome. The office door closed softly behind her, the click of the lock a final punctuation to the chapter she had just finished. And as she walked down the hallway, the light from the windows, casting fleeting reflections on the glass walls, Maya felt the weight of the world shift. She had changed it, and now, all that was left was the silence of knowing that her journey had only just begun.